Save the city streets, feed the hungry mouths. Ain't no Moses on the beach, Jesus on the shroud. Save the little people from the corporate culture crowd.
In less than 48 hours, Dennis Forsberg will surrender himself to federal prison, where he will spend the next 3 years behind bars. His son Lance is already serving his 3-year sentence at another federal facility hours away from home. Friends and family have been stopping to say goodbye to Dennis. Both men are part of the so-called Okemos 7, a group of successful businessmen in Okemos, Michigan, who had every reason to believe the state's new medical marijuana law would protect them from what's happening to them now.
I had 13 indictments against me, and it was just terrifying. 100 years in prison and $100 million in fines. And it was the most terrifying time in my life, and I was scared for my family. And I went in and I talked to Judge Carmody, and Judge Neff was my judge, but Judge Carmody was at the pre-sentencing. And I've got some quotes on what she had said, some exact quotes, but when I went in, I pleaded from 13 indictments, again 100 million in fines and 100 years in prison, to 3 indictments, which was 30 million in fines and 30 years in prison. Could have been the max. And another thing is that I didn't go to court. You know, I didn't go to court to fight it, because here is something that you need to know, is that you are not allowed to use any Michigan law in federal court. And so here we had 3 attorneys that we had worked with that had went to the sites. One was a federal attorney, that the sites were legal, and yet I was not allowed to use any of this evidence in federal court. And so that's why they have a 95% conviction rate. It started out where the real estate economy had tanked. You know, the market has been down, large vacancy in buildings, and we had some of our buildings that were vacant. And after the Michigan marijuana law had passed, you know, I started getting calls for leasing my buildings out. And, I basically didn't do it at first. And then when they started open dispensaries in Lansing, and they had up to 50 dispensaries at one time in the Lansing area, I talked to a couple people that had came and put together a program, and one of them was a prominent business owner, and he had spoken with the state police and law enforcement, and they liked the idea that he had came up with rather than having it in the homes, that to put it in an industrial area where instead of having 3 or 4 homes, you know, put it in an area with 4 caregivers so they could come to one spot. And law enforcement, Michigan law enforcement, seemed to like that. And so I, after I had talked with this gentleman, and he had told me that, you know, he talked to state police and the sheriff and officials about what he was doing, and they liked what he was doing, I went and I talked to the local police chief that was in our area. And I sat down with him and I said, you know, I've had empty buildings and I'd really like to lease them out. And what do I have to do to be legal per Michigan law to do this? And he says, you know, a couple things, Dennis. He says you need to make sure that it's secured. And I asked him, you know, well, secured, what do you mean? Well, you got lock on the door, so you can't have entry. And I had double locks, you know, in our facilities. And then he said it wouldn't be a bad idea to have security cameras. So we had security cameras that were, if there was a breach in the security, you know, they called the tenant and told him that, you know, that there has been a breach, and, you know, and he could go check. is that when I talked to the police chief, I offered to give him the keys. You know, I says, here's my keys. I said, you can have access anytime that you would like into my buildings. He says, no, Dennis. He says, I can't take them. But I promise you, I will notify you if there is a problem. Well, the night that there was a problem, one of my tenants, he came down because, you know, naturally when you smash the doors down and security cameras, you know, the security company had called, and he went down, and there was Black Hawk helicopters, there was National Guard, there was state police, there was DEA from out of state and in state. And when he was there, he had said, his attorney, he called his attorney was there, and he said, hey, he said, my client is legal here. And he says, he has light sensitive plants. And they said, well, you don't need to worry about that. And they not only smashed the doors down, which I didn't want, they smashed the security cameras, and then they went in and they, you know, confiscated everything. And the next day, well, that night when he was there with his attorney, you know, they said, well, it doesn't matter, we're federal agents, and we're going to do what we want here. And so in the paper the next day, the police chief was never notified. So here the law enforcement that's in control of my buildings, because I've had break-ins over the years, we've owned these buildings for a long time, have given us great service. I tell you what, our local police department, I have so much respect for them. They're there, they investigate, and they do a good job. And he seemed disappointed, you know, because he said, we weren't even called. And maybe they thought they were going to hit the mother lode or something, because they smashed the doors down, threw in tear gas, and in that 3,000 square foot warehouse, we had a total of 29 plants, or 28 plants, okay? And, but in the office, there was 2 floors and 2 separate floors, and there was a total of 142 plants there. But again, there was caretakers, and they were under their plant count for there. So then we go over to Allen Township, and in that location, there was 3 sites. They were around 700 square foot per site in these little warehouses, mini warehouses. And between the 3 sites, they had around 150 plants in the 3 sites. And they had search warrants for both of those areas that night. And here's the thing, is that they said that I was in a conspiracy, and they lumped all those plants together and gave them to me. And that I was a drug kingpin. So I was advised from my legal counsel to do a plea, and again I pleaded from 13 to 3, and one was within 1,000 feet of a school, and by the way, when the school had called the township, because I had spoke with the township and they knew what I was doing, very transparent, I had called the superintendent, and I asked her what the problem was. And she said, well, I hear they're selling marijuana and they got a dispensary there. And I said, ma'am, I says, you know, I went to Okemos High School, was on an undefeated basketball team my junior year, played football, basketball, just, you know, had great coaches there. I love that school system. And I said, ma'am, I said, that is a double secured medical marijuana facility. I said, we are growing medical marijuana there, but we are not selling and not distributing. The federal government still can come in, even though that it's safe, okay, and that the state has voted on it. The federal prosecutor made it very clear to me that I have no right to even have one plant in my possession. Even though the state of Michigan has issued me a license, all my caretakers had licenses, we had legal counsel that went to the sites, and everything was legal per Michigan law. But I'm telling you that the federal government can still come into those states anytime they want and take you of all your plants and prosecute you. So I just, here it's a wonderful medicine, cancer patients and all these patients that can take medical marijuana and still function, instead of all these hard drugs that like Libby and all these major name drug companies are selling. And it just doesn't make any sense why the federal government, other than when they come in and they stole all of my equipment and all the lighting and everything. I mean, there was like $50,000, $60,000, and I put a bond up to get that back through the state, and never. They gave me my money back and said, we're keeping everything for evidence. Now here's another thing. It took 1 year. It took 1 year for them to indict us. And then it was 2 years. 2 years and just tens of thousands of dollars. And we didn't even go to court.
For legal fees, you mean?
Yeah, for legal fees. We paid these legal fees and didn't even go to court. And they're saying it's $500,000 or more if you go to court. But here's another thing, is that and I wanted to go to court because I was so upset, but when they have a 95% conviction rate and you're not allowed to use any Michigan law in federal court, and they have what they call a safety valve. I have a perfect record. Everybody that I was involved with in my properties at that time had perfect records. Now we're all felons. And with those perfect records, I wasn't allowed a safety valve because they said I was a drug kingpin and in conspiracy because I was the owner of the buildings. And then, but they did give me the 5-1K when I did a plea bargain agreement. Okay, and they went from 13 indictments down to 3, and that 5-1K allowed the judge not to give me the maximum sentence, gave her a little leeway. Now, they wanted to put me, the prosecutor wanted a minimum 5 years or more. And the judge, when she read my letters, I had over 50 letters. I could have got a lot more, but I had people that, sent in letters. And they said they've never seen letters like that, my attorneys, in all the years that they've been in practice. Letters and the things that I've done in the community and helping other people and helping in the community and homeless and anyways, but that goes unsaid. What you do to help people, you don't need to tell other people. It's just the right thing to do. When you've been in a community for 50 years and we have grown and prospered, and so, we like to give back, and so the judge, bless her heart, Judge Neff, instead of 5 years minimum that the prosecuting attorney, she gave me 3 years. The punishment for the crime that was committed is way out of whack. I mean, to put me in jail and away from my family, and I have one daughter. She's the youngest, and my wife. I've been married for 37 years, and 3 sons. And I have one son that is also in federal prison because he grew medical marijuana, and he had a passion to help other people with growing, and to be tore away from my family. Either it tears the family structure apart or it strengthens it. And I thank God with my family, all the pain and suffering that we've went through, I feel that it's strengthened my family. And with the help of the good Lord, being away for 3 years. Now, 3 years with no income to my family. I can't even do business. I'm not allowed to do business in prison, and I'm in real estate and development. And now, the market is starting to, come back a little bit. And now, I've got to be away from my family. It's just for 3 years, and I go in on July 23rd. And So my message to other honest business people and patriots, I'm a patriot and I love this country, but when you see the United States of America against Dennis James Forsberg and 13 indictments thrown at you, and my attorneys are scratching their heads and just they're trying to figure out why I was even indicted when we're within Michigan law. I don't understand the justice system, but I just know that you please check with your attorneys, federal attorneys, and I don't recommend, even though you think you're safe. And I had, some partners, and we put in money, and we had over $100 and some thousand in build out, because we, with my buildings and in this build out and everything, and they come in and they destroy it and take everything and keep everything, and thank God they didn't forfeit my buildings and take the buildings away, but they did take everything, again, the lighting and plants and everything to do with grow equipment, and then they get to auction it and sell it. So please just be careful out there, because you think you're safe, and with federal law you have no right. At my plea sentencing with Judge Carmody, and she says this has been a disaster between state and federal law, and Mr. Forsberg, I'm sorry to say, but you are caught in the middle of it. And then at my final sentencing with Judge Neff, a few months later, she had stated that, again, that, here we have the Attorney General in Michigan that is a voted elected official, and she just made a comment that why isn't he helping Michigan citizens, and we have been in business over 50 years. Look at a farmer east of us that a federal agent came in and said you're doing a good job, and then 2 months later, all the agents came back and tore his operation apart, took his farm that was in the family for 50 years, and he took him to court to fight him. He said this isn't right. Well, when he took him to court to fight him, he couldn't have a safety valve or a 501k, and so he's in prison for 10 years. His son is in prison for 5 years, and he lost the family farm that was in the family for 50 years and the homestead, and what does that do to his wife and daughters? It's forfeited. Yeah.
Just because he tried to fight it. Yeah.
They're vindictive.
They just don't care.
And here,
has it changed your attitude? About how society works, how government works?
Definitely about government. I wouldn't necessarily say society, because I feel like society, at least the people that are in our lives, have been, even closer to us and are very supportive on our part of the situation. So, definitely on the government. I've heard things about how terrible it can be to people and what they can do, but actually having it happen to yourself, it's definitely changed my attitude towards the government. 100%.
When I went and I talked to the federal agent, it was like I was already guilty. She had already had her mind made up, and
I'm never going to be able to forgive them for taking my father away from me for 3 years and my brother away from me for 3 years. And it's tough.
And I asked, if I could do public service or something, here in the area, to benefit my area. I'd much rather work here, and if I'm going to be incarcerated, tether me and have me work around here, so at least I can be with my family and be constructive in my community and helping other people. But I'm going to be 13 hours away, and because of my medical condition, I have thrombosis, and it's blood clotting in my left leg, and so I got to take medicine every day, and I wear a 30-pound sock and with my medication. So I'm going to a facility in Butner, North Carolina, but it's 13 hours one way for my family. And
at least we get to stop and see Lance on the way.
Yeah, Lance is in West Virginia.
We go through there, so. And no one should do time for a victimless crime.
Yes, and another one too is people that we're afraid of should be locked up, not people we're mad at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
That's a good one.
some of the people that wrote letters for us, Lance. You know, they just shook their heads. They said the same thing. I mean, these people are not going to sleep better by us being incarcerated. You know
Right,
what?
no doubt.
They're going to be hurt because with your time that you
Yeah.
volunteered in Lansing
Exactly.
and helping these grow programs and gardening for the homeless and I, you know, with the homeless and these wild game dinners and fundraisers, I mean, it hurt our community by locking us up.
Yeah, it really did.
Sure does.
We're not going to forget you, Lance. Your
No.
story is getting out there, and your dad's story is going to get out there. And I think the sad truth is that you guys ended up being sacrificed so that other people in the future won't have this happen.
Hopefully, though.
Yeah.
You know, at least we have some good
That
come
will
from
be
it.
good.
That's
you know.
That's the main thing. I tell you what, Lance and I, you know, we didn't do what we did to hurt anyone. We did it because there was a need. There was a need for medical marijuana and getting rid of these hard drugs that make you so you can't function, and like rubs and like for gout and back pain, you know, and these
It's
oils.
the misinformation that keep it from being a medical miracle, not the product itself. And it's just too bad that even with patents on the product, the federal government can't own up to truth.
Oh,
There is so many chemical components that are both naturally present in all subspecies as well as the human body. We're not talking about foreign chemicals. We're talking about nature's remedies, all wrapped up into one plant with infinite amounts of combinations. It's a lack of understanding, not the plant itself, that keeps us from doing the right thing.
exactly.
You know, it's just too bad that they're putting people in prison who are trying to understand it.
Yeah.
So I tell you what, being here, it's meeting a lot of people going through the same thing too.
It's crazy the
It's
stories about
unfortunate.
people that are in there.
Exactly. It just doesn't seem right, Lance, that here we could be in the community doing community services and helping in our community, and now, you know, you're 6.5 hours away and I'm going to be 13 hours away from our community and family.
Exactly.
There is no rhyme nor reason with the federal government other than they need to have bodies in the prison because you know, because they're short on quota or whatever.
Exactly. They got to keep them filled. You know, private prison systems it's a fortune. Hey, my phone's beeping. Are you still there?
Oh yeah, we're here.
Hey, I'm about to lose you guys. I got maybe a minute left here. I love you all very much.
We love you, Lanny.